Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Del Pino. I work in marketing for Residence 11, and Residence 11 is a website and community that celebrates sensuality, romance, intimacy, and loving in a new age of human connection. In advance of our first live event on February 11th, the Residence 11 Desire Summit on Sex and Relationships, which will be held in Los Angeles and live streamed, we're speaking with one of our speakers, Angie Williams. Hi, Angie. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Great. So over the next 15 to 20 minutes or so, we'll be talking to Angie. Angie's going to be speaking at the upcoming summit, talking on the topic of writing the modern romance novel with a couple of other authors, which we've also had on. Angie's the winner of the third grade essay competition on fire safety, where she grew up, and in West Texas. You've always been interested in writing since she was a child and would often would often lose interest before the end, killing the characters off in a tragic accident so that she can move on to the next story. Thankfully, as an adult, she decided it was time to write things where everyone survives, and we're very happy for that. Make sure you guys subscribe wherever you're watching so that you don't miss out any of our upcoming interviews. And for now, let's just jump in. So, Angie, we'd love to know, when and how did you get into reading romance? Like, what was your first novel? Was it the first, did you have a particular theme? Anything specific that you were drawn to?
I grew up a reader, but mostly like fantasy and horror stories, and not really romance. And I mean, of course, everybody knows that romance novels exist, but I just never read any and didn't. I grew up in West Texas, so I wasn't. To put it mildly, I was not out as a lesbian, and so I just really kind of wasn't interested in reading any of the romance novels that I knew existed. And then when I was probably 23 or so, 23, 24 maybe, a really good friend of mine for my birthday gave me, and I actually have the book right here, Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. It's like this very copy. It's well worn. And so she gave me Tipping the Velvet and some candles and like a whole bathtub, relaxing bathtub kit. And I honestly, at that point, I was out and I was in a relationship with a woman, and so I knew about lesbian sex and lesbian romance, but I'd never read about it, and it just blew my mind. Like, I was actually reading about women who had the same feelings that I had about other women, and they weren't bursting into flames or anything like that. I was in the military after I left West Texas, so this whole kind of hiding who I was stretched out longer than it had to. So this was kind of like my awakening to a broadening of my world, I guess. And so then I was hooked, and I just read everything I could possibly find. All the different authors, and at the time there weren't the pool of published lesbian authors was much smaller than it is now. So, but where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, of course. And what an interesting start, and that's a nice friend of yours,
right?
Yeah,
and it ended up leading to me meeting my wife, because
oh wow,
she was my favorite author, and I was in her fan club, and it was like a Yahoo group, and I posted in the group about my ex. We had gone to Good Vibes in San Francisco, and it was just this little trip down there. And so I wrote in her group, and she wrote me back and was like, "Oh, I liked what you wrote," and we became friends. And fast forward, um, later, and we were both single, and that was 17 and a half years ago.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Always nice to hear people who find each other and like make it work.
Yeah, especially, I gotta recommend marrying your favorite author, especially like if she writes erotica like really well.
Good tip. So, how did you get the inspiration for your first lesbian romance novel, Mending Fences? And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is back to my wife. My wife is an author, and she, for my birthday one year, several years ago, she said, for your gift, I will write you a short story. Give me basic characters and a very basic plot. And so I did. I kind of, gave her a general idea of what these characters were and a very basic idea of what I wanted the story to be. And it's basically a best friend. It's called Her Best Friend's Sister. It's by Megan O'Brien. And anyways, so she wrote that short story, and I got to the end of the short story, and I was like, well, where's the rest of it? Like, I really like this. I want more. And so she continued on, and it ended up being a published novel, and just like one of my favorite books ever. And so I jokingly said to her a couple years later, "I'm going to write you a novel. How hard can it be? You wrote me a novel," right? And I never thought I would actually do it. I mean, that's ridiculous. But I started writing. I started kind of plotting it out in my head, and she kind of pointed me in the direction of Scrivener, which is a software that I used to write, and it just helps kind of organize everything. And as I got into it and as I started writing it, I was like, man, this is a lot of fun. Like, I'm really enjoying this. I never thought that I would make it past, 2 or 3 chapters, and I was just going to go, okay, here you go. And then they kiss, and at the end. But as I went, I was like, oh, okay, well, what if they did this? And what if this happened? And I could see the ending of the story. And I ended up writing a novel, a whole novel. And then I had just written it for her. And so I enjoyed that so much that she suggested that I write fanfic, because it's an easy way to quickly kind of write things and get feedback from people. And usually in the lesbian world, at least with lesbian fanfic, they tend to be pretty gentle on the authors. Like, they're not just eviscerating everybody just for fun. And so it was fun. It was a lot of fun to I wrote some fanfic of the 100, and I wrote some fanfic of Winona Earp, and just, enjoyed that. And then I still just kind of had the story sitting there, and finally built up my my courage and sent that to Bold Strokes, who is also my wife's publisher. And and they said, yeah, let's do it. And then I got an editor, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? This is really hard, going through the editing process, but through it, I feel like I feel like every book I become a better author. And all of that editing and everything, like you just absorb all of that and become better. Anyways, yeah. So that's it.
No, it's great. Your next romance novel, The Only Fish in the Sea, is coming out in August. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that and what they can expect?
Yeah, so it is basically very loosely a kind of Romeo and Juliet type of story. It's set on the Oregon coast. Um, my grandparents, when I was a kid, uh, they live on the Oregon coast, and I would spend my summers there. They ran a marine biology camp, so the Oregon coast is just very near and dear to my heart. And so, I wanted to write something that would be set there. So this is about uh, of one character. Remy is the works for her family's crabbing um, company, and she falls in love with the daughter of the rival crabbing company. And needless to say, there are issues because these two families hate each other. One is kind of the wealthier family, and the other ones are struggling more, uh, and so there's a lot of blame back and forth and animosity between them.
Yeah, so very much like Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, very loosely that, but yeah.
So, how do you see the landscape for lesbian and sapphic romance having changed since you started writing romance?
I've only been writing for about 3 years, so it hasn't changed a lot. Um, the ways that it's changed since I've started writing are because of the pandemic. There's a lot more uh, uh, like stuff out there because of now we can do more things virtually than we did before. Um, so like this, and different interviews and readings and things like that, like kind of getting the word out and interacting with other people, with readers and other authors. It was much more limited, and so now I feel like there's more of that. And I think that lends to kind of, my wife has been writing before I knew her. So 18, 19 years, I think she's been writing. And, or she's been, a published author. And so I've kind of been around this, around lesbian publishing for a long time. And I think that there is much more of a community now than there was before. And that has
Mm-hmm.
everything to do with the internet. 100%. There just wasn't 18 years ago, there wasn't virtual interviews happening like this,
Yeah.
or virtual events, or readings that, like people would have to physically go to a city and see an author. And so I think that it has brought authors closer to their fans. Like there's more of a relationship with the between the authors and the fans than there was before. And it's nice because it feels like a family. It feels like when you're writing. I think before, it maybe kind of felt like you're writing and this is just kind of going out into the ether, and yeah, you may see reviews on it, or you can see your sales or whatever, but nothing like now. Like now, there's book clubs on Facebook, and people are tagging you and talking about your book, um, and the reviews are getting sent around, and it's just and they'll follow you on social media, and so they kind of know what your dog looks like, and what their dog looks like. And it just I think it's a more intimate relationship.
Well, speaking on that, you will be speaking at the Desire Summit on writing the modern romance novel, which will be in person and live streamed. So, can you tell me about your most recent novel, your general approach to the genre, what aspects of that novel readers may comment most on, and kind of like what could they expect from the talk that you'll be doing?
Yeah. So actually, this is my most recent novel. It's called Love and Other Rare Birds. Um, and it is about, a woman who lives in California, in kind of a Monterey Bay Aquarium type of place. And her father was a famous biologist who had his own show. Um, and he has kind of moved away from that and is now a senator. And he isn't a bad dad, but he's very, you need to be on the board. You need to be, you know, always pushing up, you know, and so she kind of gets lost in that. But to move up and to potentially be on the board, she has to do field work. And so she hears of a bird that she and her dad have kind of both looked for their whole lives. It's a bird that's a real bird, called it's actually called the Eskimo curlew or the northern curlew. On the book, I call it the northern curlew. Um, and so it was a book that was extremely common in like the 20s and 30s. I mean, like sparrows, and they were their habitat was just devastated by fields in the Midwest, and they were shot. There was just open season all the time on these birds, um, and so now they're thought to be extinct. The last confirmed sighting was in the 60s. Uh, and so she hears of a sighting in Alaska. And so she gets the funding and goes to Alaska for the summer to document, like, and to find out if this bird really does still exist. Because if it does, if she can prove this will make her career. I mean, in the bird world, this would be top notch. And so she goes up there and gets paired with a ranger, a park ranger who has left the lower 48, has gone back to Alaska, where she's from, very intentionally, to kind of get away from people. Like, she likes the remoteness of her job now, and she, fleeing a broken marriage and broken heart. And so she's paired up with this ranger as her guide. And so they spend the summer learning how to tolerate each other in this very remote cabin in the middle of Alaska, looking for this bird that is very likely extinct. And I mean, spoiler alert, there's like a lot of kissing and sex and stuff. And what was the last part of the question?
What kind of comments do you normally get from readers based on your novels? Like,
oh, right.
People reach out to you about particular aspects of it? Or are they looking for certain things? They have specific questions, or is it different depending on the novel?
It's basically like, I've gotten comments about the banter between my characters. I really love, like, my wife and I have a lot of banter with each other, and I think that is the healthiest relationship, when you can have this, kind of banter and friendship. And so I like my characters to have that. That to me shows how much they care about each other, if they can kind of tease each other, good-heartedly tease each other and banter back and forth. And so I get comments on that, and I get comments on the sex. My wife is like, an award-winning erotic author, so I'm not even going to try to hit that level. But I do like sex in books, and I like uh, you know, I don't like, I like to give detail and not skirt around all the fun parts of sex. Cause I think that, you know, sexual relationships say so much about a relationship, and how two people interact, in bed, uh, really, you know, can make a relationship last, um, you know, longer than than it might if you don't have that chemistry between. So so I get comments on the sex, like, I, you know, it's not PG, put it that way.
Sorry, my internet cut out for a second.
Oh,
So I would love to know, what advice do you have for someone who's a romance fan and wants to write a romance novel but isn't sure where to start?
um, I think that, the best advice I can give somebody who wants to write whatever you want to write, read. Read as much as you possibly can. If you want to write romance, read as many romance novels as you possibly can, and find the rhythm that these authors have, and, um, you know, read, uh, not to mimic what they're doing, but, read to find your own voice. Uh, you know, when you read a book, um, you know, if you have aspirations to write, you're reading this book, and you can't help but go, "Oh God, why did they do this? Like, they could have done this. Like, why didn't they do this?" Or you go, "Oh, I love how the author did this. Like, I love that. I love that phrasing. I love, you know, the uh, the unexpected thing they did." Um, and internalize all of that, and then just do it. Like, I think, the best advice, that I was given was, one of my favorite authors is Terry Pratchett, and the best advice I was given, was basically from Terry. It was just sent to me, that was, from something that Terry Pratchett said, um, and basically, write, 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 write. You are going to hate your first draft. Like, you're going to write your first draft, and you're going to feel like, oh my God, this is terrible. Nobody's ever going to read this. Like, why, why did I spend my time doing this? And I actually wrote down, oh yeah, I wrote down a quote from him. And he says, the first draft is just you telling yourself the story. And I think that's perfect, because you're just getting your ideas out on the paper, or the screen, or whatever. Um, and then when you go back, and read it again, um, you at least know, like, when you start a novel, even if you have an outline written, when you start a novel, you may have a general idea of where you want it to end, but it's almost always going to change. Like, that idea is going to change. And so, uh, you just have to get it out, and have a general direction that you're going. And once you get there, and you go back to the beginning, and do it again, like, read through, and edit, the first part of your novel, then you can modify that to match where you ended up, where the novel actually ended up, not where you thought it was going to end up. And then once you go through it, and then you go back to the beginning, and you do it again, do the whole thing again. That's exactly where I'm at right now with my novel. Is, we'll probably finish this weekend, the last chapter, and then I'm going to start over. And the beginning, like the first half of my book, is going to take a ton of modifying to get where I ended up going. But it's so much easier to do when you are happy with where you landed. it doesn't feel quite so, how am I ever going to get there? You at least have like the framing of your house is built. Yeah, so that's my advice. It's just to read, and then write.
Mm-hmm. So what else do you have that you're working on next? Is it just your upcoming novel, or do you have anything else that you want to share?
Sure. Yeah. So I just signed a contract for a novel after the one I'm working on now, that I'm super excited about. It's a historical romance set just after the Civil War. It's called A Heart Divided. And it's basically a character, a young girl, is she accidentally murders her stepfather, who is abusing her mother, and he ends up killing the mother, but he's a judge. So this is, think this is like just after the Civil War. She's just killed the local judge. This doesn't matter. There's no justification for what she's done is in the eyes of society. So to kind of escape that, what is surely going to be death, she joins a local. Though there's soldiers that are camping in her town, and so she dresses as a man and falls in with the ranks, and fights in the Civil War. So the novel picks up after the Civil War, where she's lived for 3 years or whatever as a man, and now the war is over, and living it, as a man just feels right to him. And so he gets a job at a horse ranch of a widow whose husband fought for the other side in the war, and they end up falling in love, but this widow doesn't know that he is not all that he seems.
Well, that sounds like a lot, and I'm sure that everybody's super excited to see all that you have coming up next. Thank you, Angie. This has been fantastic. Where can people find you? I know we have your Instagram below, but we talked beforehand that you have a website. Is there anywhere else that people can find out more about you and maybe connect with you?
Let's see. I am doing the thing, the Residence 11 thing in February, and then I will be at the Golden Crown Literary Society Awards in June, late June, and that'll be in GCLS is what it's called, in Denver. And that's in late June, and then we're hoping to be Women's Week in Provincetown, Massachusetts, in October.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today, Angie.
Yeah.
Everybody, you can find Angie on her website at angiewilliamsbooks.com. And make sure to check out our summit on February 11th at summit.residence11.com, where Angie will be talking about writing the modern romance novel. You can join us in person or through live stream. Okay, thanks so much, Angie, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.